Welcome back to the Deem Dive, where we take your stack of information and turn it into instant expertise.
Today, we are focusing our oversized lens on a very specific, very purple phenomenon from the mid-1970s, Grape Ape. He was 7 stories tall, he was lovable, and he had that booming, instantly recognizable catchphrase.
Grape Ape, Grape Ape.
Exactly.
It's a character you just can't forget, even if you weren't, alive in 1975.
Yeah.
That simple chant and that sort of gentle giant persona made him an instant massive hit in the Hanna-Barbera universe.
Oh, a triumph. By all measures of an immediate launch, it was a huge success.
It was, but the sources we've analyzed, they detail this really critical separation point. Despite that initial explosion of popularity, why did Grape Ape become what we now see as just a nostalgic footnote?
Right, and not a true multi-generational franchise like, say, Scooby-Doo or the Flintstones.
That's the core question. And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're digging into the structural, the narrative, and the cultural limitations that really shaped his entire path. We're going to unpack 6 major shortcomings that, ironically, were baked right into the Big Purple phenomenon from the very start.
What's so fascinating here is that the qualities that made him instantly iconic, that simplicity, that visual punch, that marketability.
They were the very things that held him back.
Exactly. He was a character designed perfectly for his moment, which meant he was completely ill-equipped for the future.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with what the analysis really identifies as the foundation of all his issues. The built-in limitation of one-note characterization.
Right. If you strip away the color and the size, the premise is incredibly thin. I mean, he is a massive purple gorilla who means well.
But causes chaos just by existing.
Yes. He's reactive, he's not proactive, he doesn't drive the plot, he's the obstacle that drives the plot for everybody else.
So his whole personality, the sources suggest, is defined by basically 3 things. His size, his color, and just repeating his own name.
There's no internal life, no
Well,
complex wants, no signature neuroses, nothing.
and that's where the narrative potential just hits a wall, almost immediately.
It becomes a completely static figure. I mean, think about the comparison. When we look at successful Hanna-Barbera characters, they're defined by their flaws and their desires.
Like Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo has that insatiable hunger and, paralyzing fear. Yogi Bear has ambition and an ego that always clashes with Ranger Smith.
They have internal conflicts. That gives the writers something to work with for decades.
And the writers of Grape Ape just didn't have that luxury. If you don't give the character desires or flaws, you can only really write one kind of story.
A discovery story. Over and over.
Exactly. His simplicity, while maybe endearing to a 4-year-old, it just restricted any genuine character growth. You couldn't have him evolve.
Because it would break the premise.
It would fundamentally break that simple, gentle giant premise. The structure was just too rigid.
And that lack of complexity, that feeds directly into the second major issue the analysis highlights, the inevitable repetitive story structure.
This is where we run into, narrative deja vu every single Saturday morning.
Because if the character can't change, the plot can't change either.
That's it. The sources outline this predictable 4-step loop that wears thin very, very quickly. Step 1. Grape Ape and his companion, Beagle, arrive in a new location.
Usually some small town.
Step 2. The townspeople panic, obviously. There's a 7-story purple gorilla.
Step 3. A misunderstanding escalates. Things get broken.
And Step 4. Grape Ape proves he's harmless, everyone relaxes, and then they leave for the next town. Rinse and repeat.
Okay, but wait. Isn't that true of almost all Hanna-Barbera shows? I mean, Yogi Bear is always trying to steal picnic baskets. Scooby-Doo is always unmasking a villain. Why did it hurt Grape Ape more?
That's a great question, and it really speaks to the difference between structural repetition and character repetition. In Scooby-Doo, yeah, the mystery structure repeats, but the relationships, Shaggy and Scooby's fear, Velma's skepticism, they evolve subtly. The villains change.
And in Grape Ape.
There's no ongoing mystery, and the only constant relationship is the static one between him and Beagle, and they're just passing through.
So there are no long-term stakes. No evolving community relationships. They just hit the reset button every single episode.
Right. So the viewer is never invested beyond the immediate, temporary gag of the chaos.
The formula was built for syndication, not for sustained engagement.
It was built to sustain the premise, but it offered no reward for coming back week after week, hoping to see characters grow.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's move on to the visual component because that faced a similar problem. This brings us to visual gag fatigue.
The visual humor of the show hinges entirely on the novelty of a giant purple gorilla in a human-sized world. The joke is the scale.
But visual humor needs to escalate.
Right.
If you've seen the same sight gag 50 times, it just stops being funny.
It does. And the sources point out that the series relied so heavily on the same handful of gags.
Like Grape Ape folding himself into a tiny compact car.
That happened in nearly every episode. Or him collapsing structures with one footstep, or those oversized footprints.
The shock value just disappears.
Yeah.
You know exactly what's going to happen when he tries to walk into a small shop.
It's predictable physics, and this is really a symptom of a failure to evolve artistically.
Because you see, modern animation, it reinvents its visual jokes. It uses meta-humor or complex, character-driven comedy. Grape Ape never even attempted that.
Never. The design was static because it had to be, and the humor never grew beyond that initial simple premise.
So eventually it's not a joke anymore, it's just scenery.
Exactly. The show became visually stagnant and predictable. Its core concept was a visual gag with a very, very short shelf life.
And that artistic stagnation that connects directly to the character remaining culturally frozen.
Yeah.
That's our fourth constraint, limited cultural relevance.
This is absolutely critical for any kind of multi-generational longevity. Grape Ape never benefited from the modern wave of nostalgia-driven revivals.
No reboot.
No major redesign, no serious reinterpretation for a new generation. So if you see him today, he is stuck exclusively in 1970s aesthetics and sensibilities.
That's right. And the sources highlight this by contrasting him with other legacy characters who've been refreshed successfully.
Look at the modern versions of DuckTales or She-Ra.
Yeah.
Those reboots, they kept the core appeal, but they updated the aesthetics, they modernized the narrative structures, and added layers of complexity that appeal to today's viewers.
They gave the old characters new relevance.
Precisely, and without that modern exposure, Grape Ape is just tethered to a specific era. For younger audiences today, he's a relic. He's a piece of retro trivia.
Not a timeless icon they can actually connect with.
Because he doesn't exist in their world. His entire library is just stuck in rerun loops of 1970s cartoons, which just can't compete.
That's a powerful constraint, just being erased by time because nobody invested in refreshing the brand.
Well,
Now let's pivot a little to the production side, starting with an issue that is really counterintuitive for a series star, the sidekick problem. You'd think having a companion would help, but in this case, his companion was actually a limiting factor.
he really was. We need to talk about Beagle properly. He's that tiny, scrappy, fedora-wearing dog who acts as Grape Ape's manager.
And constant companion.
And he frequently acts as the true narrative anchor. He often drives the plot more effectively than the massive gorilla the show is named after.
So how does that actually, play out? Because normally a sidekick is there to support the hero, not replace their agency.
Well, Beagle's the one who has to explain everything to Grape Ape. He's the one negotiating with the terrified townspeople. He provides all the exposition.
He's basically the audience's point of view.
He is. He's the straight man, the negotiator, and the problem solver, all rolled into one.
So the star of the show, this giant purple spectacle, is actually being unintentionally sidelined.
Exactly. When the sidekick carries all the narrative weight, the main character is reduced to, well, just a visual spectacle, an ornament.
He becomes the catalyst for chaos.
But Beagle is the one with the agency to clean up the mess and move the plot forward.
It's a classic production limitation then.
Yeah.
They created a character so simple and so huge that he couldn't reasonably interact with the normal world.
So they had to invent another character who could talk, negotiate, and drive a car.
Thereby making the main character less essential to the actual story.
And that's where you lose investment. You're watching a show called Grape Ape, but the actual emotional and narrative center is the small, hyperverbal dog.
Wow. And that is a fantastic transition to our final structural constraint, the sixth one, which connects all this back to the original intent, merchandising over substance.
This is textbook Hanna-Barbera, particularly in the 70s when the commercialization of Saturday mornings was at its absolute peak.
So the sources are pretty clear on this.
Oh, very. Grape Ape was designed from the ground up with commercial potential first. Bold color for visual appeal, a simple, massive silhouette kids would love.
And an easy catchphrase.
Perfect for a lunchbox.
So the priority wasn't developing a complex story world, it was making sure the character looked great on a toy.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that tension between commerce and creativity, it's fatal to longevity. The sources suggest a lot of episodes felt less like narrative and more like vehicles for brand recognition.
Just to sell products.
And to make those licensing deals easier and to facilitate cheaper animation abroad, the design had to remain perfectly static.
Yes, that's the critical loop. To maintain marketability, so the toy and the coloring book and the screen character are identical.
Huh.
So the design could never evolve.
And that requirement just severely limited the writer's freedom to mature or complicate or explore the character. It contributes directly to the lack of depth we started with.
It created a prison of simplicity.
It did. The focus on commercial ease, which brought that instant financial success, simultaneously ensured the character could never achieve the narrative complexity needed for true longevity.
So the design worked perfectly for a 2-season run and a lifetime on lunchboxes.
But it prohibited the character from becoming a lasting part of the cultural imagination beyond that initial nostalgic hit.
Okay, so let's synthesize this. We've looked at 6 powerful, interconnected constraints that kept Grape Ape from becoming a timeless classic. It started with the one-note character, which forced the use of repetitive story structures,
That led to the inevitable visual gag fatigue.
which ensured the character remained frozen in time without a chance for a relevant reboot.
And on the production side, you had the sidekick problem stripping away his agency.
All because the real focus was on merchandising over substance.
The conclusion, according to our analysis, is that Grape Ape is this memorable, bold artifact of 1970s animation, a perfect product of his time. But the very qualities that made him an instant smash, that simplicity, that visual punch, his marketability, were the precise structural factors that constrained his ability to evolve.
They were built-in limits from day one. He captured the imagination of millions, but he couldn't hold on to it across decades.
Because the structure was just too rigid to allow for the kind of subtle growth and reinvention that other characters, like the cast of Scooby-Doo, were able to achieve.
It's a really compelling case study in animation economics. It shows the high cost of creative rigidity.
And it raises an important question for you, the listener, to consider as we wrap up this deep dive. If simplicity and marketability ruled Saturday mornings in the 1970s, does that intense commercial pressure to create easily digestible static characters inherently limit a property's potential to become a truly timeless icon?
If the goal is a great toy, can you ever have a truly great, long-lasting character? Something for you to mull over. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. We hope you feel a little more well-informed about the shortcomings of a giant purple ape. We'll see you next time.